Good morning, everyone. Kevin here from Skywatcher. Welcome to another episode of the What's Up Webcast. Today is February 24th, 2023, for any of you that are watching this after this has aired. Like all of our episodes, this is pre-recorded. You can go back and watch any of them in any order that you might like if you want to see something. So thanks for joining us this morning. Today is the last Friday of the month, which means we're here to talk to our special guest of the month, who we'll bring in here for a minute. If you've been with us before, thank you very much. If this is new to you, please go ahead and subscribe, leave a like on our channel. Lets us know that we're doing a good job and that we should keep doing this because it's a lot of work and you should praise us for all of that. So, but anyway, today we're going to get started. I'd like to join our special guest, Athena Frost. Thank you, Athena, for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Hello. Happy to be here.
So I don't know where I'm going with things today. I'm running way too fast in my head. We were talking a little bit before we brought you on, but you work with Griffith Observatory. You've worked at Adler Planetarium. You're like a science educator. You do all kinds of amazing things, which is why you're here with us this morning, and we're talking shop. But how did your interest in astronomy and space start? I ask this question to everybody. It's always interesting to hear how we got started.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a cliche. I don't know how many other people have answered in this way, but Star Trek. Uh, I was literally born while watching Star Trek. My mother had the original series going on as she was birthing me. So,
Top that, Jeff. My boss, Jeff, who's watching, is a massive Star Trek fan. I don't know if he can top that one.
yeah, I was born watching Star Trek. I'm a second generation Trekkie, so that is really what got me started in it. I wasn't ever sure what I wanted to do, but I was like, I know I want to deal with astronomy. That's definitely what I always knew I wanted to do. Yeah.
Did you go to school for astronomy or anything like that?
Yeah, so my undergraduate degree is in physics with a specialization in astrophysics from the University of Chicago. I went there because, and if anyone is interested in going into astronomy, I went there because they were really good for getting research. So I was published while I was still in my undergrad, and that was thanks to all the like great scientific research that's done there. I also can never say anything bad about Chicago. um, I worked I worked in planetarium since I was like 14. There was actually a planetarium in the middle school of my school corporation.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and like I still talk to the director who just recently retired. So I would actually talk to him to help about getting like, you know, K through 12 education for planetariums because he was always like very good at that. There's some fun stories about what used to happen on accident with that. Um, like like one time we were doing a kindergarten show and there was like the HVAC that was behind there. So this guy like all of a sudden he opens up the HVAC and so there's like a silhouette in the sky of a man and the kids start screaming it's God. And we're just
That's
like,
awesome.
oh, that's not part of the show, kids. It's not part of the show.
Now you know. So,
Right. So yeah, I was always interested in it. I've worked in like four different planetariums, Griffith in Los Angeles and Adler in Chicago being like the big like international level ones.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now I'm sure it's kind of cool because astronomy tends to be kind of a male dominated world, it seems like. So I think it's kind of cool for especially like younger kids to come into like Griffith or Adler and then for them to see you, this woman who knows all this stuff about physics and the way the universe works and stuff like that. And you kind of set this tone that these young girls can you can be like you're like this role model for these young women that are coming into it now, and like, oh, I could be a physicist, or I could be an astronomer, or I could whatever. um do you ever get that when you're walking around the planetariums and kind of representing at that point? So,
Yeah, it's funny because while I feel like there's obviously some systemic issues with in science and STEM, at least in physics and astronomy, I never felt othered. It was very much like, if you can do the math, if you can do the work, then we like you. I'll never forget, I was doing this research um, on type 2n supernovas, and I'll never forget, I was using this data from like the top radio astronomer at the time. I think it was from like the Royal Astronomical Society. I don't remember his name. And I was like doing the math, and I was just like, this seems wrong. This seems wrong. Why is it wrong? Why am I calculating it wrong? I spent like half a day, and then I go to my PI, so you're the primary, and he like looks at it, he's like, oh, you're right. I have something to do. And he calls this guy up, and it's just like, guess what? This 20-year-old just like proved that your paper was wrong. Like he was, I always felt very supported by all of the like professors and teachers, even, like even when I was like in middle school. And so I had that. So I never really felt other, and I always felt comfortable. And so as an adult, and like I taught at the high school and college level as well, I always wanted to like let people know, it's like, it doesn't really matter what your background is. Math is the universal language. And also, it was always of my opinion that it was important. There's kind of like a holistic idea when it comes to educating, whether we're educating the public or when I was educating at high school and college level, of like, let's not, a lot of people fear math and science. And when you come in with that attitude, and when you come in and you have teachers who don't even really understand the physics themselves, it just kind of like pushes that forward more and more. um, I'm happy to say that like I got some students, some of color and women, who ended up going to the sciences after taking classes with me, who hadn't thought of doing it before. And that just like warms my heart whenever I see that. um and because anyone can do it. And I think that whether even like men that, like white men who are like, oh, I'm not good at math, and I'm like, who says who? These days with like pedagogy, with like how you teach things, there's this idea that there's like one way to do it, and that's just not true. And science has a lot of creativity in it. And so I would always try to teach my students that with critical thinking, if it's something that you're interested in, you can definitely do it. I don't know if
it's
that answered
almost
your question.
oh no, it's good though, because I think it touches on a lot of touchy subjects that are going on in the world right now. But I think one of the underlying things that I like about science, particularly astronomy, is um, it's kind of like, if you want to be in here, you kind of have to leave all the systemic problems at the door at that point. And it's like, we're here to learn about the universe, something that's so much bigger than our. And I know these problems are extremely serious. I'm not trying to make any light of that, but it's more of like, we need to quit screwing around and being difficult with each other and just be inclusive with each other, because the what we're trying to find the answers to is so much bigger on the scale of things. And I think that's why I like astronomy so much, is there's a level of humility that you have to have in you when you walk through the door, and that level of respect for what you're trying to do, that it's like, you know what, we can all be good to each other, because what we're trying to do is ultimately answer the biggest questions that we have. So um
And when you're
and what
reading
I
a peer-reviewed paper, it just says like first initial, last name. You have no idea who this person is. You just
mm-hmm,
know that like they have an outlook that you need to understand so that you can do the work you want to do.
yeah, they clearly some street credibility if their name is on a paper and we're talking about this particular topic, or it's like, yeah, this binary star is blah 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 blah. It's like, oh, here's the physics behind it. So
Exactly.
but it's I do think it's cool that you are able to kind of show people, particularly young people, that you can do whatever you want in the world nowadays, and if you want it, you make it happen, and poof, and I think that's how I got started too. It was kind of like you, where it was like a science center, and I volunteered there when I was young, and then it just kind of takes over, and you kind of get stuck in this crazy world, and it's like, well, guess I'm a lifer at this point, and it just drags you around, and you never really know where you're gonna end up. So when did you start at Adler then?
Yeah, I started so I worked at the Maryville Community Planetarium from like 8th grade through senior year. And then when I went to University of Chicago, I started like my summer after that, my first summer there, I started working at Adler Planetarium. And I actually started as like a guard. And the guard, they actually do train them properly. Like, I don't know how it necessarily is now, but they made it to like if you walk up there and you're just like, what's the difference between astrology and astronomy? Like they have to be able to answer that.
Hmm.
But like 2 weeks in, they were like, I think you can have another job here. So
Yes.
so then I started working in the planetarium. For any planetarium nerds, I use the Digistar 1 and the Carl Zeiss planetarium projector Mark 7, which was from 1974. It had been around. When you looked at it, it actually said it was made in East Germany. That's how old it was, guys.
Vintage.
How
Before the wall came down. Vintage.
right. Sometimes the southern sphere would not turn on, and then we had to like run downstairs and like switch some stuff and then run back upstairs.
We had to reestablish connection with the southern hemisphere. Just smack it with a wrench.
Pretty much. There was a lot of duct tape going on.
Yes.
But
no one needs to know. So it
right?
worked. It was entertaining. No one needs to know. So
I love Adler because of, first of all, it's the first planetarium on the Western Hemisphere. It was the second planetarium in the world. And it has like 3 theaters and 3 planetariums, but it's 4 different objects. So cool. We had like a 3D theater, and then we had like a digital theater, and then we had the Zeiss, and then we had this what's called the Atwood sphere, which it was made for naval officers. So it was like this ball that was like the size, it was like maybe 30 feet wide, right? Or that would be like about like 10 meters wide. And they actually like would go up into it, and they had like little pinpricks so that naval officers could like navigate
oh, how
throughout.
cool.
It's so great. It's so great. I love it. And it's very large. Like most planetariums are just the planetarium. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But I loved it there. I spent like about 5 years working at their planetarium.
That's what I would, kids who are interested in science. If there's a way you can find a reason to volunteer at a local science museum or get a job at a science center or something, if you have an interest in it and you're like, I don't really know where I want to go with any of this, to just see if you could volunteer on the weekends or something, because then that just gets your foot in the door, which I'm sure you've seen now, and maybe you can relate to this because it comes up with me quite a bit when I do events. It's like, oh, what'd you get your degree in? And it's very different in our world now, where you're told to go to college and you get a degree, and all these young kids are hopping into there, and it's like, then you get out and you're like, well, what's your experience? And you have none. So it's like, okay, well, I was told if I got this degree I would go get a job, and poof, everything's great. And it's just not that way anymore.
It
So
is not.
so I think that's a good way to get in the door, is like what you've done, where it's like if you can get your foot in the door and start establishing that interest in science, and then that gets you used to meeting people and working with people, and you're building that footwork of, yes, I do have experience in these levels, and I feel like that tends to pay off. And then if you need to get a degree to navigate wherever you need to go, then that just exemplifies your experience at that point too. So
Yeah, because not everyone needs a degree for what you want to do, but in the sciences, it is obviously very necessary.
yeah.
Um, I would not make anyone read Feynman without help. Um, bless your heart, don't do it. But yeah, and also it's lovely because at Adler, there are real scientists there that publish. You can actually get a postdoc at Adler Planetarium.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they mostly deal with like asteroids and like they didn't deal with stuff that I particularly was interested in, but it was like yeah, they definitely deal with asteroids and I think like just like smaller celestial objects. I'm pretty sure. And they're
Like
also
minor
very
bodies and stuff like
minor
that.
bodies. That's the word
Yeah.
I was looking for. Yeah, I was just like, I want to deal with supernovas and supermassive black holes, and they're
Yeah.
like, we don't do that here.
I want to deal with legit stuff. So,
Right.
I want to look at a rock, a walk outside. So.
Right. And they also
I'm
like
sorry
they
for
operate
anybody
themselves.
that probably upset, but
They're very sweet.
yeah.
It's fine. Like, I also like I don't know about other people's experience, but I must say, like, you know, the professors that I had were just the sweetest people ever. Like, I was just like, I'm on 3 hours of sleep, and I just saw Dawn for the fifth time this week. And they're just like, isn't physics great, guys? Let's do more. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
It's amazing what happens to a person when they're wired on 3 hours of sleep, 5 Red Bulls, and they've seen the sunrise for 5 days in a row. It's like, I know what I'm talking about. It's like, do you? It might be concerned, but that's where all this amazing ideas come from. It's like when you're sleep deprived and have no idea what's going on. That's where discoveries are made right there.
Yeah, they were, oh, just doing such amazing research. I actually like after working on supernovas, I started, believe it or not, like just working on lasers in this chemistry lab because it just sounded so interesting what he was doing that I was just like, yeah, sure. I'm just gonna like email this guy and see if he's willing to work with me. And he was just like, sure, come in. And I definitely almost blinded myself several times. The postdoc was like, Athena, put your head up. Because it's like lasers that you can't they were not in the visible light, and we had
Okay.
glasses for it, but it's still like you still couldn't really see it. And so we'd like adjust things, and then I'd be like adjusting, and he'd be like, Athena, put your head up. I was like, right, don't put your head below this amount, you will blind yourself.
We are working with lasers. When
Yes.
working with lasers, you need to have the proper laser stuff on. So it sounds like you've been able to get your hands into a lot of really unique and fun things through your path. And I think a lot of people in the science world, it does tend to, your path is kind of like that. You just kind of stumble into one thing and another. And like we've had astronauts on, we had Don Pettit on once, and that guy is ridiculous. It's very, stories are a lot like yours where it's just, it's kind of like, okay, how did you end up in a lab where you're like messing around with lasers? And then like you'll talk to Don Pettit and he'll be like, yeah, so before I was an astronaut, I got the phone call to get in for astronaut training when I was taking magma samples inside of an active volcano in Iceland. It's just like, what? So, it's just like things like that. I think it's kind of funny in the science world where it's amazing where science will take you and your experiences with that. So, because it's like you're a woman from Chicago, and then it's like I've been to Adler and I've messed with lasers, and now I'm in LA and I'm in another place, and it's like you're every day. I'm sure it's like you never really know what's going to pop up on the radar anymore. if you are doing calculations for something, what you're going to prove or discover or whatever. So it's kind of an exciting thing, I'm sure, in its own way, and I'm sure it never gets old for you. What's going to pop up in your email box, like us inviting you on here? It's like, hey, tell us about all the stuff you've done. So.
Yeah, I think just being curious is important, and I think, and also being questioning. Like, there was this one thing I would always do at the beginning of the school year, because we're dealing with like just like basic mechanics, and I just had this like round stuffed cow, like a spherical cow, named Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh my god.
And I would like drop him, and then I'd be like, hey guys, like, so our spherical cow just accelerated towards the earth, and the earth just accelerated up towards the cow, and everyone's just like writing that down, and I'm just like, no, don't be okay with that. Why are you okay with that? I just said the earth accelerated up towards this stuffed animal. You all are okay with that? Like, you need to question things. And we go through the math of like, yes, the Earth does. It's obviously so small that there's no way we would be able to measure it. But the point is that like we all need to be questioning, and critical thinking. And obviously, every student that I have doesn't become a physicist, but I hope that every student that I have becomes a critical thinker, which is something
Mm-hmm.
else that I think that we need more of in American society today.
just, just a little bit.
Just a little bit, just a little bit. And also just like understanding like how we learn, and how like humanity moves forward, with our understanding of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like you have to prove it, and sometimes everyone agrees with this, and then we learn something new, and then it changes.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that what was before was a lie. It just means that what
It's
was before
evolved.
was our best understanding.
Yeah. I think that's why one of my favorite movies is The Dead Poet Society. And I think what I really take away from that is kind of like what you were saying, where it's like he gets up on the desk and it's like, why do I stand up here? And it's like to feel taller. It's like, well, no. And anytime you go into a classroom, some kid's probably going to say something stupid like that. But it's kind of that profound thing where it's like, no, you should always try to look at the world in a different way. And it's like, even though if it's silly or weird or people make fun of you for it, it's like you should try to look at it from another angle. And to me, that movie, I think, really helped like click my mindset into gear about being a critical thinker. And like, just because someone tells you that's what it is doesn't necessarily mean it has to be that way. And especially when you're talking about the universe and physics and stuff like that, it's like, this is how you see it right now, all up until the point someone comes by, questions it, and then shows you like, oh, maybe they have a point. And then you start looking at it. And I mean, for example, like all these images of the black holes that we're starting to get, it's like we'll never be able to see that or whatever. But then you have Stephen Hawking's like, no, this is what it's going to be like, and here's the math to support it. And then decades later, the technology catches up and we're able to see it. It's like, holy crap, he was right. but yeah, at times it can be kind of like your stuffed cow, where it's like, the earth didn't move. Why would I'll just take a note about that and get on with my class. But it's like, no, but if you take a minute to think about what we're talking about, it's like, whoa, that's actually kind of neat. And I think that's the hard part about being in school nowadays, is you're not told to listen. You're just told to document it and
Right.
get on with it.
You're just supposed to like regurgitate what you're doing, but I'm like, this is
Yeah,
about active learning. Like,
exactly. And I could see that's probably why you like doing outreach like at Griffith and stuff, because you have the tools there to make that hands-on and active, and it's not just here's a book, read chapter 7. It's like, no, go explore, break something, try it out, like learn something.
that is one of the things that's very special about Griffith Observatory, which is different than like the Hayden Planetarium. I've been every time I travel somewhere, I always go to whatever planetarium they have.
Mm-hmm.
And Hayden Planetarium in New York, which is also wonderful. But what makes Griffith special is that it's an observatory, like
Yeah.
truly. Every single day, every single night, daytime we have the celestat, which allows us to
Mm-hmm.
look at the sun. Nighttime we have the historic Zeiss planetarium. I almost said planetarium projector. We do have that, but we have the historic Zeiss telescope and then telescopes on the lawn. And it's like, that was something that was really exciting to me when I came to LA because in Chicago, it gets cloudy a lot. And also, I'll
Mm-hmm.
never forget being like 14 years old and I had like it must have been like a 3-inch refractor and like trying to like look at Jupiter, and I was so cold that like every time I like tried to look through it, like I would shiver and it would move out of out of
Yes.
the view. And I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to be an astronomer. Let's go
Yeah.
theoretical. I
Yeah.
can do that indoors. and
Yes.
and so it's like amazing that at Griffith you can have people that are like looking through telescopes all the time. um, One time there was this 87-year-old woman from the Philippines, and she didn't even speak Tagalog, which is the not normal, but is the more popular language of the Philippines. But
Mm-hmm.
she spoke some other language, they were telling me, and we brought her up and like helped her up the stairs to the historic telescope to like look through it. And it was so amazing for her. And it was the first time this woman had looked through a telescope. And I I always have to remind myself that for a lot of people, it is the first time they've looked through a telescope. Like, I mean, I've been
Yeah.
looking through telescopes since as long as I can remember. But for other people, that's not true. And like, we give that opportunity for free every day that it's not cloudy.
Yeah.
and and that's something that I find is so very special about Griffith Observatory.
And it's Griffith's real. I remember when I moved to LA. I mean, you move to LA and it's like light pollution's terrible. When you think of stars, everyone's like Hollywood. It's like, no, that's not, it has its own vibe, but then, up on the hill there, right next to the Hollywood sign is like this sacred place for astronomy. That's just in the most weird place, but then you go up there and it's just like, I mean, it's still, you can see all of Hollywood and all the crazy things going on there, but it's like the rest of the world just like shuts off at that point. It's like the grounds up there are stunning, like, and I know they've had a lot of famous performances up there and stuff like that, but I think what's really cool about that is you see so many people from so many walks of life, which that's LA, and everyone walks to the door of that place and everyone has that deep vested interest, whether it's 5 seconds or you want to make it your life. That's like, wow, this is really cool. Like, astronomy is very neat and I didn't think about it that way. And then of course then you have the experience of the telescope and showing people the moon and whatever's up at that point. And it's such a cool place. It's unlike anything else in LA at that point. So, and
Agreed.
I'm
Yeah,
sure you
people
get
are
that when you're
always
there.
disappointed that they can't see the Hollywood sign at night because people always assume that there's lights on it. And there
Yeah.
are, but we don't turn them on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it
It's
is.
over there.
It,
Come
like,
back
it's over there. If
tomorrow.
you like squint, you can see it, and they're just like, well, like, yeah,
It's a
no.
bunch of white letters on a hill that spell HOLL. It's just Google it.
It is next to a bunch of people's homes. Like, they don't want bright lights on it all the time.
Don't live in the Hollywood Hills. That's
Right. I also would, if even if I had the money, would not live by the Hollywood sign. Like,
too
they're
many earthquakes. So,
right.
no, so do you work at Griffith uh, multiple times a week, or how? Or what do you at Griffith now?
Yeah, so until very recently when I got laid off from Vox Media, I
Boo.
yeah, I would pretty much just work on the weekends. But now I'm working like 3 or 4 times a week. It's interesting working during the weekdays because I'm used to the weekends when it's always like full of lots of people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that I can work during the day now because I personally love the Celestat. It's just like you know, as a as a theoretical astrophysicist, a lot of theoretical astrophysicists are not really astronomers. Like
No.
they may study galaxies in the Virgo cluster, but they couldn't point out the Virgo constellation to save their life.
Exactly. It's like it's over there. So
So like somewhere where Virgo is. But because I've worked at planetariums for like most of my life at this point, like 2/3 of my life at this point, you know, like I definitely know where all the constellations are, and it's so cool to see. Like I really love being able to like actually see everything. And so to actually see the like sunspots and everything during the daytime, I love. I like to just hang out there and just be like, someone needs to come over here so I can tell them this dot is the size of the earth.
yeah, I like the spectrograph that they have on that because
Yes.
it's I love spectroscopy, and I think it's one of those things where everyone's like, it's the rainbow. It's like, yeah, but do you see the lines? It's like, that's like the freaking barcode of the universe right there. It's like, that's oxygen. It's like, that
I
means it's
am using
there.
that. I've never called it the barcode. That's perfect. That is a perfect way of saying it.
And then when you start to explain it to people, like, whoa, it's like, yeah, and that's how we know what something is there. And it's not just Skittles or something like that, or some pretty thing I just looked at. It's like it means something. So,
Yes. I also love, I mean, because I love the whole seal set, but I also love the hydrogen alpha because,
oh well, yeah. Who doesn't like
right?
hydrogen
Like
alpha?
with the spectrograph, like I feel like unless we explain it to them, I feel like they don't quite get it. But
It's another tier at that point for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Like if they're adults, then they can usually and they like vaguely remember it from high school or college
Mm-hmm.
class, then they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. Or if they're just really into astronomy and they happen to know about it. But with the hydrogen alpha, when you can like see like filaments on the sun, or you can like see some of those, oh, it's just beautiful. and and I love like children always go whoa when they look through it. I love
Uh,
it. They
I've
always
got
do
a
it. I love it.
I've got a couple of the hydrogen alpha scopes here at home, and it's just to go out and be like, yeah, that could wipe us out if it wanted to. It's just, I think that's the coolest thing about the sun, though, and what people just don't get is, you take that for granted, where it's like, oh, there's the sun, and it's just that light bulb in the sky, and I'm gonna go on with my day, kind of a thing. But it's like that is a nuclear. It's, as I've explained to people before, that's like beauty and chaos all in one thing, and it's like a freaking wind up top to where if it wanted to, it could obliterate half the planets in the solar system at that point. And a few billion years, that's exactly what it's going to do.
That's
But
definitely gonna happen.
it's just, I think that's what I like and about teaching people about astronomy is like you should understand just what you're looking at is this
Mhm.
active thing. It's not living, breathing, but it's converting the hydrogen to helium, and then the atoms in your body are being built in those, you know, furnaces at that point. So it's like you're literally watching creation at that point. So it's crazy, and I kind of like to go down that line of things, but just because it gets people to think about it. So.
Yeah, I always find it fun to think about the different ways that the sun can kill us.
Here's my book. All the way the suns could kill us.
Well, and there's another thing. Like I think it was like the late 19th century when there was a solar flare that knocked out all of electricity on the planet.
Yes.
And it was like there wasn't a lot of electricity on the planet during that time, but people definitely freaked out. And I always think about that because I'm like, if a solar flare of that size happens again, we're all screwed. It's going to be like the apocalypse over here. It's going to knock out all the
Oh yeah.
satellites. We will temporarily not have any electricity. People are going to be
Like
freaking
Carrington
out.
event, 1859.
Ah,
So
yes. Oh, I thought it was even later. I knew it was like 19th century because it was like early electricity, but it was
yeah.
1859.
Uh, according to this. So it's
Yeah, yeah. I was like, oh man. I remember reading about it and it's so cool. And also my next thing is like people always think about like, oh, the sun is gonna like eventually the sun is gonna become a red giant. It's gonna be, around where Jupiter is. But I'm like, oh, but it will be non-inhabitable on the Earth so much sooner. In a couple 100 million years, it's going to get so hot that like literally all the water on the Earth will evaporate. So
Or in 50 if we keep going. No, I'm just
I know,
kidding.
right?
There's a whole nother conversation we could spin off if we wanted to go down that route, which we're
Right.
going to avoid so we don't lose subscribers. So it's like, but
I feel
uh,
like as you in Arizona, you're like really feeling it though.
yeah, it's like amateurs. It's like, I know what the apocalypse feels like. Have you ever been here in August? It's like,
That's why Chicago's the best because Lake Superior is the largest by like you know like two-dimensional landmass, but because Lake Michigan is the deepest, it is actually the lake that has the most water in it. So it has the most freshwater lake in the world. So everyone should move to Chicago.
you'll just freeze to death in the winter. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
have you have you been to Adler recently?
So I do an outreach program every summer. The pandemic, I haven't done it in the last couple of years, but every summer I take a group of high school students to Adler Planetarium and then Yorkies Observatory.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Yorkies. But so yeah, so I always go there every year. And one of the things that I love about it is first I get to see all my friends that are still there. And also because Adler's like always like in a state of becoming. They're always like looking on ways to be better by with
Mm-hmm.
new exhibits and better exhibits and updating things. So I every time that I go there, I literally have to like go to the website, call up a couple friends because I always give a tour, but I have to like know what's there each time because it's
Mm-hmm.
different every year, which I love. I actually love that about it.
Yeah, because we're friends with plane wave telescopes, and they just updated the telescope at Adler Planetarium now, which is, I think it was like a 16 or a 20 or something that was in there. Now they
Yeah.
have this like 24-inch, like crazy high tech setup there. So good for them.
That
So,
was one of the things. Yeah, the Dome Observatory, which faces into the lake, so that makes the most sense, right? And when I was there, I think they opened it up to the public like maybe four times. Like we really never used it. And it's like cloudy and it's cold at times, so to an extent that makes sense. But that was why I was excited about Griffith. But yes, I heard that now they refurbished it. They actually open it. They have telescopes on the lawn just like they do for Griffith, and I'm excited to see what they're doing over there.
I think that's the cool thing about. I love going into an observatory, especially like a dome, like Griffith, where it just makes you feel like you're stepping into something. It's very Victorian esque, where it's like, wow, we are doing like you could be looking at the moon, and it's nothing scientifically special, but there's just a vibe when you step into places like that, where it's like, yeah, this is like seriously legitimate stuff at this point. I mean, going out on the lawn and looking through a telescope is there's nothing like looking through a telescope in general, but when you step into an observatory where it's like this is a very serious piece of equipment and the fact that you get to be in here and it just makes you feel like you're a part of that experience at that point.
Yeah.
So, I can't imagine doing you said you went to Yerkes?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the big refractors there.
Oh,
So,
I love it. Because Yerkes used to be part of the University of Chicago, and the outreach program that I did is through the University of Chicago. So things got a little tricky when U of C was like, okay, we're done with this place now, which was fair because like how no one really does optical. Uh, there's
you
some
know
people.
that money and stuff is a factor. So,
Yeah, yeah. And luckily the Yerkes Foundation was able to like buy it and keep it going, which is just great. And they've really been like taking care of it. But what you're describing of that like feeling of being a part of something scientific and important, you definitely feel that at Yerkes. They also like have the largest elevator in the world.
yeah, the whole freaking floor
The
goes up and
whole
down.
floor moves up. It's the coolest thing ever. And I love how like the docents there, because they're like, we're all going to look at some cool stuff, but also these are high school students and we want to be on a cool elevator thing. And it is
Yeah.
a lot of fun. They like I could not believe they did this. They actually like let one of the students like hang on to the telescope and like swing on it. And I was just like, okay, well, great.
Hey, whatever gets kids excited about it, that's because that's a memory thing. I think those are little. I have science teachers I think back on. It's like, wow, that was so over the top and stupid what we did in that class, but I remember it. And it's like those were kind of those sparks where it's like, I did this. And it's like, then you start to backtrack. It's like, that's what kind of got me hooked on some of this stuff, whereas those were the memories that were like, it doesn't have to be this stuffy lab coat thing all the time. It could, we could be fun about it, and even if it's not doing anything in particular, but it sticks with you. And then that kind of, and I know you see it where you probably talk to so many people in a week, and every now and again you probably just get those handfuls that kind of, that one kid who comes back. It's like, I have a question about this. And then it's like, aha, I got you. So it's like,
I love it. So we have regular talks about the Tesla coil at Griffith Observatory. Um, Tesla coil doesn't actually have anything to do with astronomy, but it's cool. But I like to always say at the end, I'm like, and if you have any questions about anything, like ask me, ask any of the other guides here. And I love it when people come and like really like ask questions. And there's like that sweet spot of like sixth graders. Like they know enough, but also like the world has not beaten them down yet enough that they're still like excited about the world.
yes,
They
your
ask
dreams
like,
will come true.
right? They ask such great questions about, like science, and like sometimes I'll just be like there for like 40 minutes and the parents are like, "We're sorry." And I'm like, "No. This person can keep asking questions. This is what I'm here for."
Pull up a freaking chair. Like, we're
Right?
going to school. So,
I'm
no,
like,
that makes up a good point, though. And you probably see it where there's probably so many people out there that have questions, but they're afraid to ask the question. Even if it's something minute, it's like, don't be afraid to ask a question. Like,
yeah.
you're not stupid. Everything around you was once a question, and it's now reality. So,
And especially like so I taught a couple classes at the college level, but I mostly taught at this place called Whitney Young High School, which is
mm-hmm.
it's a magnet high school. Like it's very affluent. Like Michelle Obama went to this school, right?
Okay.
And the Wachowskis. And so it was like these students, they're going to become important and they're afraid to ask questions because they don't want to look stupid in front of these other people. And so, especially when I was teaching the AP classes, I feel like they especially were like, I don't want to ask a question. Then people think that I'm not smart. And it's like the ones that ask the questions usually are the smart ones. And I always tell them, I'm like, you got to realize that like the question you're about to ask, there's like five other people in the classroom that are like, I'm so glad they said that, And I used to say if I get three good questions in a class, I would give them like one extra credit point. And there's nothing students love more than extra credit.
I will bribe you. I am not above bribery. So, no, I think my favorite ones, because I like working with high school level, are the jocks, because it's hysterical, because they all show up to an event because they're supposed to go because they have to get their points. And then they're just like, all right, we did it. We looked through all the scopes. Can we go? And then they go. And there's always one of them that comes back when the group is gone. And they're like, I saw the space station. I thought that was really cool. Can you tell me more about it? It's like, aha. There is. But it's sad, though, in a way, because it's like it's kind of what society does right now, where you're not encouraged to ask questions. And I think ultimately, probably just talking to you in this little hour, I think that's probably the lesson of the day, actually, is to don't be afraid to ask questions and be curious and be hungry for that. And if someone else isn't going to ask the question, then be brave enough to step up and you ask it, because that expands your horizons. And then you probably unknowingly expand someone else's.
100%. Yeah, I love all my students. I get a little too attached to them. Like I still like have lunch with them sometimes because a lot of them, going to like Stanford and like UCLA because once again, all of my students were amazing. Um, and it's just so it's just so important to keep that inquisitive mind. And some people are shy and they don't want to ask a question in front of like, 40 other kids. And that's
No, I
okay. Like, you can always do, like you said, you can always be that jock that like comes back later and it's just like, by the way, like, how often does the International Space Station go around, that's always fine too. In fact, that's usually what I did, mostly because I just wanted to like really nerd out with my professors. I'd always go to office hours. I'd wait till everyone asked the questions about the homework, and then I'd be like, "Okay, but I want to talk about spin. Let's talk about spin now."
yeah.
So yeah, I always loved that, and it was funny because I was uh, always the only black person in the classroom. There were at the University of Chicago while I was there were four black people in the entire physics department.
Mm-hmm.
It was two undergrads, one grad student, and one administrator. And so it was hard for my professors to forget me because I always sat in the front row and I was the only person of color they knew.
Yeah.
Or black person, but there were other people of color.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was, yeah, they definitely never forgot me.
No, and it's good. We had a guest on, oh man, a while ago. I know him, he's a friend of mine. He's from India, Dr. Vishnu Reddy, University of Arizona. He started astronomy when he was in India, and now he's a professor at U of A teaching kids how to track near Earth asteroids and satellite detection and stuff like that. He's a
I wonder if he knows the
master.
guys at Adler.
He might. So, hey, Vishnu. If you're watching this, I know you're very well connected, and I'm not going to question who you know. But it's cool to see someone who just has that. You never know where that spark or that little seed is gonna come from. Anywhere in the world, it could be, girl from Chicago, guy from India, whatever the case may be, and then you just kind of go down this path. But it's someone in the chat has a good one. A questioning attitude shows care and engagement. So, you just have to care a little bit about it, but you have to be willing to question things, and you have to be hungry to go after it. And I think that's kind of what you tend to, what the vibe I get from you is that's what you try to do with your students or anybody that walks through the door at Griffith. And I think that's where Griffith is really cool, because a lot of the people there are of that same mindset, and it's like, it is cool, like it's okay to ask questions, and not everything you think is going to be right, but let's figure it out together. So
Yeah, and I always loved that. I There was one year where I taught for the first hour. So all these kids are like, they're arriving late due to like no problem of their own, and none of them are awake yet. And so I would teach them mostly through scaring them. So like like I'll never forget, we were learning about resistance. So I just took some like steel wool and a battery next to this guy that was barely awake, and I just like put it on his desk and then just kept talking about it until it lit on fire, and he was like, "What's going on?" And I was just like, "We're talking about resistance. Why do we think that just lit on fire, guys?"
yes, that's the cool thing about doing like the experiments. That's what I always loved about science, is it makes science become this living, breathing entity at that point, where it's not just like, we're learning about this concept, turn to page 8. It's like, okay, that's great. Where it's like, oh my god, why did that happen? It's like, you asked a question, now we have to experiment and figure out why that happened. And that's how the question starts, is, oh my god, fire came from stick, how does that happen? And oh, by friction, it heats everything up and blah, 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 blah. But poof, there it goes. It's like, oh, interesting. But you got to ask the question. So.
And I always had to like, oh, I mean, I was at my mentor teacher, Mr. Gallo, at Whitney Young, so amazing because once again, I was all like theoretical, like, what does Einstein call it? Like mind experiments. I loved it. Like, let's talk about a train and relativity. So when I became a teacher, I knew that once again, people learn differently. So some people learn visually, and some people learn auditory, and some people learn kinetically. So like by doing. And so I was like, it was always my goal as much as possible to teach in those three ways for every topic, which meant that you had to do like labs and demos and like, what do I know? Like I just type things into a computer program to figure things out, right? And so I worked so hard to like come up with like short demos, and I learned so much from Mr. Gallo on how to do a lot of that. He had so many cool things. Like you're talking about like jocks. Another thing that I used to do is I used to take a copper tube, and I would take like a penny, and I would just like drop the penny through the copper tube, and I'd be like, all right, first I'd be like, all right, who's the athlete in the class? Like who's the person with like the best skills? And so it'd be like, oh me, I'm the MVP for the baseball. It's like, okay, all right. So I need you to catch this penny. And so like I drop it, and of course they catch it. And then I take a magnet, and anyone who knows what's about to happen now, then I take a magnet and I drop it, and they're always like ready to catch it, and I'm just like, oh, it's taking a long time to go through there. What's going on with that? And they also never catch it when it finally drops through, which I always found hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, how is it that the magnet going through the copper tube is not falling at the rate of G? Like, what's going on here? And then we get to like talk about it. But I always like to keep, I never even knew about that demo until Mr. Gallo showed me like all these like wonderful things. And I think it was just always so important to show it to everyone. And I would always try to like use use things that involved the community and the things that people were interested in, because Whitney Young was very much big on like sports. Like some, I guess I'm not really into sports, but apparently like some of the students at Whitney Young have become like NBA stars. Like we're
Okay.
like serious. Um, so I was always like using that. There were some that were really big into what do you call it? Debate. So we have like an amazing debate team. So we did a mock trial using the McDonald's like coffee,
Mm.
the whole like McDonald's coffee lawsuit, using Newton's law of cooling. So it was just like, what can we do to like connect with what the kids already care and appreciate, and then connect it with physics. And like the kids just like loved the lawsuit. They just like enjoyed it like maybe too much. And it was also great because like I said, there's also the aspect of people who are, some are just more introverted or just more shy. So because there were so many different roles, the ones that wanted to be like, I'm Atticus Finch, like they could be the ones that were the prosecutor, or not prosecutors, but the defendant, the defense lawyers. There we go. And then like, the ones that didn't want to talk at all, they could be like the jury, and then they would just write like a one-page report. So it was like I always was trying to do things in approaching science, uh, like coming to them to get to approach science. So
Yeah, you gotta make it obtainable, which I think is the hard thing about science for a lot of people. Is it just seems like something that's done in a far off lab and with expensive stuff, and it's so beyond, you know, anyone. Like, oh, I need to go to years of school before I get to do it, whatever. But it's like, no, a lot of this is so obtainable. You just have to kind of look for it. So it's cool that you take the time to, like, the magnet and the copper pipe kind of thing, where it's like, it's just little stuff that you could find at Home Depot or something like that. And you've proven science to be a relatable thing. It's like we didn't have some bajillion-dollar chemistry lab, or, you know, whatever the case may be. You've just made it obtainable with a freaking magnet and a copper tube. So it's like, so.
yeah, and it's funny you talking about obtainable, because I remember it was only a couple of weeks ago at Griffith. This guy comes up to me and he's like, oh, I know you have to have a lot of money for this or whatever, but like, what would you have to do to be able to see the Milky Way? And I was just like, first in my head, I'm just like, why would you need money to see the Milky Way? But I like quiet that down. And then I'm like, actually, you just need a nice dark sky. Like, like from here,
Do
just
you
like
have a
drive,
car? So
right?
it's like
Yeah, like just like drive an hour towards the desert and like you could see it. It's right there,
the only tools you need are some gas, a car, and a curious mind, and
right?
about an hour of time in that direction. So then you're good. You're welcome. So
Right? Oh, I was just
uh,
talking about someone the other day, and they're like, and everyone here, of course, is probably realizing it's like you have the moon, it's like beautiful and like waxing, and then there's like these two very bright dots, and it's like it's nice to just like take a moment to like notice the sky, because that's the reason why planetariums exist, is because with the advent of electricity, we're all happy about electricity. um, but that caused light pollution. And all of a sudden, there was this disconnect with the sky. And so being able to just like you're driving home or you're walking your dog and you go like, oh, what are those dots? Oh, that's Jupiter and Venus. Holy crap, and I think it's really beautiful to just like, we also just talk more about mindfulness and everything these days. It's just like go outside at night and just like notice what's out there. Like my favorite constellation, Orion, is out there right now. The brightest star in the night sky, Sirius, is out every night right now. Like just, you don't have to have a telescope to just like appreciate the sky.
yeah, it's just more. Just take 5 minutes and look up
Right?
because we're so busy with these dumb things that we're just all like, there's no incentive to look up. You're always looking down. You're always looking through someone else's life. It's like, put that away, look up, and just experience what's in front of you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what another reason I like astronomy is. It's like, just put it away. Like, it's fine to be on it, but just put it away for a minute and shut it down and just look up, because that sky is the same thing as your ancestors saw centuries ago. These, before there was the iPhone and the iPad and all these things, we told stories with the sky, and those stories still remain after all these centuries. They still remain, and we can still look up and be like, oh, there it is, and
Yeah.
blah 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 blah. So it's I biggest thing is I think people just need to slow down. I know the world's very fast, but it's like sometimes you got to slow down. It's like Ferris Bueller. It's like sometimes you just have to slow down. So,
Also in Chicago.
oh my god, and that's. I don't think we can. That might just wrap it up at that point. We have like 3 minutes left, but I think that just brought it all the way around, and Athena just mic dropped it at that point. So, boom. Um, I don't know if you guys have any questions. We only have a few minutes left. I didn't see any in the chat, but if you have any questions for Athena, now is the time to throw them in the chat so I can throw them over to her, so I can let her get on with her day. But if you want to know more about Griffith Observatory, just Google it. I'm sure you'll run into Athena there at some point. If you're traveling to LA, it's definitely a place to go and visit for certain. And then I have not been to Adler. I would love to. I've just never been up there. So one of these days I got to get up there. So
Yes, Adler is amazing. And also, like every time that you see like a beautiful picture of the skyline of Chicago, it's literally always taken from Adler. One of the great things about planetariums is that they're always in beautiful locations.
yeah, you need to. Have you been out to Arizona?
I haven't. I've driven
You need to
through
come
it.
to. You need to come out here so we can go to like Lowell Observatory and Kitt Peak and the Mirror Lab where they're making the 8.4 meter mirrors for the Giant Magellan telescopes. We've got stuff too. It's like,
I've always wanted to go to Kitt Peak for sure.
well, come out and we will make it happen. So,
I'm in.
well, Athena, thank you very much. It's been really fun talking to you this morning, and hopefully we can have you back on. My question was a comparison between the. That's a lot. Never mind. Anyway, I'm sorry to cut people off. Thank you very much for spending your morning with us. We definitely appreciate it. And hopefully we can have you back on at some point. And it was nice meeting you. So
Lovely meeting and chatting with you for the hour, Kevin. Thank you so much. I was glad to be here.
awesome. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this week's What's Up Webcast episode. Thank you for hanging out with us. Big thanks to Athena for hanging out with us. Go visit her at Griffith Observatory. Bug her at ask frickin' questions. So, but have a good weekend to everybody who is watching, and we'll see you guys next Friday. So thank you very much. Clear skies, and we'll see you guys next week. Take care. Bye.